This is the Griffin Realty Group Ask-A-Griffin podcast, episode number 27. We start our series on closing. Why should you pay attention to contract details? Are you a home seller or home buyer who has questions about selling or buying residential real estate, but you can't find an easy way to get your answers? Well, then, hey, you're definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Griffin Realty Group and the host of the Ask-A-Griffin podcast. And to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, if you need to sell your property right now or buy a property right now or in the near future, you can take advantage of our free step-by-step guides that are waiting for you at griffincourses.com. That's GRIFFIN courses.com. All right, let's get started. We are in the closing section of our seller series. This is the final section, the drum roll, before you close on the property and you finally sell. And it starts off with a question that we get all the time. Why should I pay attention to all these contract details? And again, a lot of the times we are giving you the question you should be asking yourself, because this is a process and this is late in that process, this closing module, and you want to make sure you get it right. And here's why. Point number one. Number one, you really need to become aware that your signed contract includes details of very critical dates and deadlines. Now, because selling your property is such an emotional process, you get caught up in that process of actually getting to the point of going under agreement. And so do a lot of real estate agents. They get excited, everything goes under agreement, and there's such a rush to get to that point that we often neglect what we're actually signing. Now, don't get me wrong. In most cases, there's not much to worry about, presuming that you have a competent real estate agent who is using board-approved forms, meaning that they've been overlooked typically by legal counsel for the board of realtors in your local area if it's a standard form and the blanks have been filled in. But those blanks mean everything to you. And you have to take a minute to breathe and not rush and think about what am I agreeing to as far as a timeline. Because the timeline when it comes to the closing stage is very short. You might have your property on the market for several months, even longer, only to find out that once you go under contract to close, it's an extremely short period of time, relatively speaking, to the long listing and selling process. So you've agreed to, in some cases, even when I sold my own property, it was a 2-week closing. And there are enormous amounts of detail that have to happen in that short period of time. 30 days is also fast. 45 days to 60 days is a little bit more typical. And then if it gets protracted even longer than that, there are other types of risks that come with a slow closing. So this is a very critical stage that you just have to become aware before you get there, that once you sign that contract, you are obligated by that contract to meet certain dates and deadlines. Now, of course, the highest recommendation I could give you is to also include at this stage, right before you sign the contract for sale, you want to incorporate the help of a real estate attorney. That's the best advice we can give you. They are contract experts. So we would absolutely recommend you hire a competent attorney, real estate attorney, who does this on a regular basis in conjunction with your realtor and perhaps the standard forms, if not more, based on what the attorney believes should be included. But you have to understand that there in the standard ones would be a home inspection contingency period. And that's really that's when the meat of the renegotiation, if there is going to be any, happens post that inspection, because buyers will make you an offer based on what they can typically see or they feel at the moment, only to be petrified after they see this long checklist from the home inspector, especially if it's a first-time home buyer or just anybody for that matter that has a worry paradigm, and they see this laundry list of maintenance items that maybe you didn't even know were required at this moment in time. That's why we always recommend you should do a seller home inspection so you're not surprised. So you've signed this, there's the home inspection period. There might even be a home sale contingency period where the buyer has to sell a home and they make the offer that way. You have to seriously consider what those dates would mean to you coming off the market. There are mortgage contingency dates. So on it goes with dates and details that need to be you need to pay attention to them and sit down and thoroughly discuss it with your realtor so you understand the reality of that moment. And hopefully you've already started to move, and hopefully you've already thought about getting organized so that this just doesn't become a total stress fest. All right? So critical dates and details are in that contract. Second point here, and here's a big deal. Because deposit money, in this case, the buyer's deposit money, is at stake, you must secure all necessary extensions or withdrawals in writing. Now, on the rare occasion that several attorneys agree, and at that point in time, it depends on, in Massachusetts, we're typically an attorney to an attorney state. In other states, this is all handled by the escrow company. But what I would say is, the seller, you want to make sure you're protecting the deal and the deposit money that is coming your way as part of the sale. Now, of course, you don't have control over that. Your agent does, or the escrow company does. They have control. And as long as you comply, then you're in good shape and you're not breaching the contract. So when somebody asks for example, a home inspection contingency extension, let's say they go in there, a generalist inspector goes in and they say, you really should have a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning specialist, also known as HVAC. Somebody should come in and take a look at the heating system. And you can't get that contractor out there to take a second look. You might ask, or you might be asked, in this case, because you're the seller, you might be asked for an extension. Now, we recommend, if it's reasonable, if the time frame for the extension is reasonable, you extend it. You extend it, because these are issues that come up that will have to be dealt with either during this purchase, or if this deal falls apart, the next one. So as long as those extension requests are reasonable, as long as your realtor is communicating with the other side and bringing back to you the real why, especially in a mortgage contingency. Why do you need a mortgage contingency extension? What is the issue? And once they find out, they can determine with you if that's a legitimate issue, and then you extend it or not. And in the case where you're not going to extend, and the buyer is going to walk away from the deal, you have to also secure the withdrawal form. You can't just subsequently say, I'm going to walk away from this deal. No, you're in a contract. Informal extensions and withdrawals must be and should be in writing to protect you going forward either way. Okay? Now, the third point here, when you look at the closing process, this is where there are a whole bunch of other parties, outside sources that get introduced. In fact, as of the recording of this podcast, I am coming from I was in the field today representing a buyer on a very high-end transaction. And we not only were coordinating our home inspector, but we were also incorporating and coordinating the appraiser. So at the same time, all of a sudden, all these third parties are coming into the transaction. So you as the seller are seeing this happen, and you're recognizing, wow, there's a lot going on here. And again, it's a condensed period of time where a lot has to happen to keep on track. So it's very important that you and your realtor are having proper, timely, and thorough communication with each other and with all the buy-side parties that are involved. So in our state, for example, in Massachusetts, you're going to be seeing the discussion back and forth with you and the realtor, you and the attorney, and then when something comes from the other side, and of course, all the other parties, you and the mover. And if you're closing at the same time, you see where I'm going? There are a lot of people to communicate with. So the best thing to do also is just try to stay calm and in control during all of this. And the more thorough and organized you are, the better. See, the realtors get stressed out too, because they're trying to do the best that they can to orchestrate all these parties. And if you've ever really looked into the world of real estate and real estate agency, coordinating third parties is difficult. We're trying to be the professional for you that we can be, and all of a sudden we've just become an orchestra leader during the closing process. So it's important that you sit with your realtor and your realtor goes over a plan, and that you're looking at those deadlines, and as each box is checked, you move swiftly to the next one. Little tiny delays in reacting to what needs to be done next can really cause a lot of anxiety, and worse, it can really cause unnecessary extensions that can also put the entire deal in jeopardy, because once communication breaks down about these details, people's stress level goes up to a whole other level, and oftentimes it can blow up a deal where there's no need for that to happen. Okay? Because people get emotional, they get upset, and they feel like they're being taken advantage of, or whatever happens, they just decide it's easier to not do the deal and send a formal withdrawal based on their contingencies and move on. And you don't want that to happen, because then you have to start all over again. So let me go through this one more time. This is the closing module in our seller series. And the question on the table is why you should pay attention to contract details, or why should you pay attention to contract details? And the first point was, well, first of all, you should be aware that your signed contract includes details of critical dates and deadlines that you're accountable to. That's the first big why. The next big why is because deposit money, the buyers, is at stake, and you must secure any and all necessary extensions or even a withdrawal in writing to protect not only the dispute over deposit money, but also your ability to move on cleanly if the deal doesn't consummate. And lastly, you must understand that the details would also include you understanding the proper, timely, and thorough communication with all parties, because it's critical. Otherwise, you could lose a deal, okay? So remember, it's not just your realtor. If you have an attorney, it's your attorney. If you have an escrow company, it's your escrow company. If it's a mover, it's your mover. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've seen somebody not coordinate their mover on time, and all of a sudden you're asking for an unnecessary extension to close as the seller because you really weren't fully prepared or thoroughly serious about understanding these dates and deadlines. Be ready to sell. It's exactly why we ask you, when you deal with us at the Griffin Realty Group, we ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you to sell this property? Because when you're properly motivated at a 10, you will easily adhere to these dates and deadlines and be prepared to consummate the deal on time. All right, let me summarize it this way. It's important to remember that during the closing process, you as the seller are obligated by a contract to adhere to certain dates and deadlines that you must adhere to or risk losing your deal. Now remember, you can take immediate action to get started in a better direction if you really need to sell or buy property right now or in the near future by getting our free step-by-step guides at griffincourses.com. That's GRIFFIN courses.com. And again, that's the condensed version of this podcast series that we go through, where we're giving you micro tips out of the entire course. Now, the course is not that long, and it's easier to just read it if you're ready to go right now. So griffincourses.com. You can get the buyer plan, the seller plan, or if you're an agent listening in and you need a plan for yourself, we have one of those too. Also, don't forget you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen so that you don't miss out on any of the insights each time we upload an episode. We also post all of our episodes on our social media channels, so remember to turn on notifications for Griffin Realty Group. You'll see our nice little logo there with the mythical griffin on it, and you won't miss those reminders. We'd also appreciate it if you would share our content with other people just like you so they get the help that they need. Thanks for listening, but remember, nobody's coming for you to sell your house without you taking your own action and getting to work on your own plan. But we will see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks for listening.